Next year. You don't rate yourself. Or you don't. You don't rate yourself. But I felt like you. Sure.
Hey, sorry, we're running a little late this evening, but we start off with an opening presentation, and I think Mr. Morthy is going to begin with an introduction for us before we call the public meeting to order.
Behind every amazing student are amazing teachers. And so we start by recognizing Ethan Eigenfeld. I hope I said that right, Ethan. Got the right pronunciation. But the teachers behind him are amazing video production teachers, and one of them is Mr. Ryan Radford, and the gentleman that got him along the way is Mr. Rob Giesbrick. So if you guys could stand and just be acknowledged, that
to order. And first off, as per policy 1204, bylaws of the board, this regular meeting of the Board of Education will be recorded and may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board also reserves the right to edit or by motion of the board at any meeting, choose to not stream live or archive a meeting or a portion thereof. It won't be as exciting as Ethan's though. And I'd also like to recognize that acknowledge that the Langley School District is located on the traditional lands of the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Matsqui First Nations. And begin with introductions. On my far right is Trustee David Todd. Next to him, Trustee Alison McVeigh, our Vice Chair, Megan Dykeman, Superintendent of Schools, Gord Stewart. I'm Rob McFarland, Chair of the Board. To my left is Secretary Treasurer Brian Isley, Trustee Rosemary Wallace, Trustee Rod Ross, and Trustee Shelley Coburn. From our district leadership team, we've got Assistant Superintendent Woody Bradford, Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill, Barry Bunyan, Director of Human Resources, Lori Mason, our Executive Assistant, and Ken Hoff, our Communications Manager. And from our partner groups, Charlotte Major and Barney Wilson from QP 1260, Wendy Cook from the and Gurpreet from the LTA, Suzanne Perot from DPAC, and Kelvin Leung from the Langley Principals and Vice Principals Association. And we begin with a report from in camera. Over to you, Trustee Dykeman.
In camera, we discussed personnel.
Okay, and that brings us to the consent agenda. Could we get a motion that the Board of Education adopts the consent agenda items as presented? Moved by Trustee Todd, seconded by Trustee Dykeman. Any comments, questions on the consent agenda? All those in favor? Any opposed? And so that brings us to presentation and the Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence.
You got some notes on it?
I do.
Good. Do you want to read both from those or not?
Sorry, you're right. I skipped over our consideration of the agenda. So can we get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Moved by Trustee Wallace, seconded by Trustee Ross. All those in favor? Any opposed? Are you going to speak to this, or?
I was going to have you, but I know Tim very well, if you'd like me to do that, either way.
You start off, I have
Okay.
some comments.
Sure, so Tim, would you mind stepping forward, Tim? And Tim has been the recently had, we saw Tim come out to Education Committee with a couple of students that he's worked with also in terms of a project in terms of oceans. And Tim has also been, I've got to have an opportunity to know personally through his initiatives around, saving the planet in terms of energy consumption and looking at going green. And he's one of the first people to kind of get on the concept of the solar panels to in terms of power some things actually within his own classroom. Even drives a smart car. I mean, he is the whole package. And I think Walnut Grove, I think, is Principal Ballinworthy would attest to. I feel very fortunate to have him there on staff. Love to hear a little bit about your experience in terms of when you went back to receive this, what that was like. But the other part is I know, Tim, that you had you were a recent recipient of the school in terms of, I think, Staples for was it $20,000?
Yeah, $20,000.
I would love it if you would speak to that also. So would you mind saying a couple things about the grant, a couple things about your experience, and then I know that our chair would love to say a few things also.
Well, we got the grant from Staples from the work of some students that it was brought to our attention first by another staff member, and one of our students got on board with it, and we brainstormed some ideas. Well, what have we done in the school environmentally? And over the last couple of years, we felt we had a pretty good list put together, and so we wrote it all up. And grade 12 girl Alicia Park crafted the written portion, and it must be a testament to her English teachers because she got us the award. After we brainstormed all of our list, and son of a gun, the Staples called us up and said, you guys won, so we've got $20,000. So we thought, what are we going to do with that money? Well, it was for environmental initiatives, so I thought it should go to further environmental initiatives. And so what we've done is, with the help of Staples and one of their technicians, I guess he'd be an IT type person, we're gonna turn my classroom into a paperless classroom next year. And so there's going to be a bit of training on my part. I'm going to take this on, but I'm going to try to encourage the students as much as possible to do all their work online, which means I also have to do all of my work online. But it's a way of doing things. It's different, right? And that's what it's all about. It's educating. It doesn't see, even the solar panel, it doesn't change the world, right? But what it does is Ryan Radford is phoning me right now. Son of a gun, he was just here. Ryan, I'm in a very important meeting right now. Just dropped the bag off in the lobby. It's actually Ryan Radford. He's, what a guy. He's a character. He leaves the room and he phones me. But anyway, as I was saying, that's what it is. It's not about changing the world. It's about educating the students who will then go on and change the world. And it's our circle of influence is small here, but it magnifies as it leaves the building. And so so maybe someone's ever thought of what does paperless actually mean. And so we're going to try that. We're going to train people along that line of thinking. I think these days every single student should have a Google account. They should all be handing in documents and doing them on. I don't need to carry a flash drive anymore. Why do I have a flash drive? I can sign in here. I can sign in there. It doesn't matter where I sign in. I'm going to have my material. So same with the solar panel and the electric car and all that kind of initiative. That whole green initiative is a way of thinking that leaves my classroom, and I've actually, believe this or not, I've heard of families, students' families who have gone and purchased electric cars because the kid keeps coming home and saying, yeah, my science teacher told me all about this, that, and I think, well, that's good. We're having an influence, and we are changing things. Just sort of, we have our circle, we have our little world right here in Langley, and we're changing it, we're influencing it. I think that's a very, very positive thing. So the Staples money will go towards furthering that even more so, and I'm quite pleased with that. I'm torn. Here we are on a day when we've all become oil barons. We all now own a pipeline, and I'm torn on that one. But it becomes a major. My grade 9 students can tell you about the ins and outs, the pros and cons, and I do my best, in all honesty, to shed light on both sides of this argument. And so I did not bring it up with Justin Trudeau. He's a little taller than I thought he was. Very good-looking man. I don't know if you noticed, but nice hair. But very, very personable man, and you're in politics, right? So 50% of the people love you and 50% of the people hate you. But what can you do? That's the line of work that they choose, and he's very good at it. He's a very good talker. He's a very friendly man. He's very personal. He says some very nice things about all of us. But it was a great opportunity, and I'm blown away. I tell everybody that I won that award because I was nominated. It does not mean that I am the best teacher in Canada by any stretch of the imagination. There are actually 10 teachers who were from across the country who gathered together. We all got the same award. One other from Vancouver, Craig Brumwell from Kitsilano Secondary, also won the same award. But we were nominated. There's lots of teachers who could be nominated and could win. There's teachers all over Walnut Grove who could be nominated for that award and win it. I happened to be nominated. I didn't think I was going to win, but boy, I'm blown away. I'm humbled by it. I look at that plaque that Trudeau handed me, and it's still got his thumbprint on it, and we hung it up on the wall, and I said to my wife the other night, we were watching TV, and it was hanging on the wall. I said, my gosh, like that, how did that happen? Like, and they'll never be able to take it away from me. Like, that'll be a career moment. And I feel very, very honored and humbled by the fact that it was a group of students who put the nomination together, and they said, whatever you're doing, we think you deserve being nominated, and I can't put my finger on it. What is it? What am I doing? But whatever it is, they felt compelled to nominate me, and I was absolutely blown away when they phoned me. Yeah.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of if you want to change the world, and if you want to influence people, influence the young folks and the students, and you will change the world, or they will change the world for us and for the better. And I know we all have the same experience as we go out and get involved in the schools and different events and get exposure to what our students are achieving in this district, thanks largely to teachers like you, and it really makes you feel confident that that our future is in good hands, and it is so impressive. But it doesn't happen by accident, and you know, as much credit as the students deserve, they don't do it by themselves. And you know, the vast majority of the teachers and the educators in our school district and others are great people doing a great job. But it doesn't surprise me from, like, I don't know you, but I know of you, and I don't think it surprised any of us when we've seen from your students and heard bits that you were successful with this. Yeah. And you know, the Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence that's a big deal. You know, even if they give out more than one in the nation, they are not giving out a whole lot of them. And so, you know, officially, my role here is to say congratulations on that, but the message I really want to give you is thank you, because you really do make a difference in so many kids' lives, and we're all here engaged in education in different capacities because we want to make the world a better place and life better for our young folks, and you do an amazing job of that. And I think one of my colleagues wants to make a comment. Trustee Wallace.
I do, because you inspire me and you inspire so many people, and we're so fortunate that you're at Walnut Grove, the largest high school, making a difference. And I just wanted to know about your reducing plastic initiative. It's something that I just want to know more about, and I don't think enough people do.
Well, if I could tie that with the Ottawa thing, there's a neat little tie in there, because when I went to Ottawa, I thought, what are these other teachers doing here? What did they do to get here? And what I found, because I watched for this, there's a common thread among all the teachers that were there, and all of them, the common thread was, we can do this. You present them with a problem, and they all have the same mentality of, oh, we could probably figure that out. Let's do that. And you see sometimes when the other one, well, that would never work, or we tried that, that will never work. But every one of them, including I think myself, we could do that. So now we got this big plastic problem. What can we do to change that? So we started back in September. I was approached by some students, said we want to start an engineering club. What should we do? And I said, well, look, one thing that I would do if I was in your shoes is I would solve this major plastic problem, or come up with this. I can't solve it, but you can come up with a solution. And so we looked into, how do you melt plastic bags? What's the melting point? How hot does it have to get? What about the fumes and all that kind of stuff? And we worked those sort of things out. And then we started with something small. We thought, well, let's build a press. And our woodshop teacher, Jerry McKay, got on board and allowed us to build this press in his woodshop. And then we said, well, we got these little coasters, but you know, coasters. Okay, but what about something bigger? And so I said bricks, because you can build stuff with bricks. And what can't you build with bricks? And so we ended up building this press again in the wood shop, and we pressed these things, 40 plastic bags per brick. We built 40 bricks, 1,600 bags, and we built that planter. We put it in the Idea Summit, and got a lot of good attention out of that. And so now we've got something. There's massive, massive momentum here, and I don't want to lose it. The school year is ending too soon, because we now have this thing going, and it's got to carry on, because there's something. Now here's what happened: is Ray Sawatsky, name you may know, teaches down at Langley Fundamental. Of course, he does all kinds of this philanthropic work around the world and stuff, and so he said that he wants to take a group or a sample of bricks to Africa. I said, yes, let's try it. Let's just see, because we had another teacher, Gerard Piper at our school, who said, I'm from South Africa. And there's 25 million people in that country who live in, that don't live in brick and mortar shelter. And they've got a plastic problem. Why are we not starting something where we're going there and we're helping with the plastic pollution problem, and we're building them shelter? And these bricks are solid. So the next big step is I need to find somebody who can help with the structural testing. What is the chemical nature of these bricks? What's the physical properties? What can we build with these things? We need some engineering help. Anybody in that field? Our engineer. Because this is the next great phase. We've got something going on. And then, of course, George said, boy, you ought to cut those into, you ought to make a slab of that plastic, and then cut it into slices like a loaf of bread, and then use our CNC machine that we got at CN and cut it into a sandal. Drill holes, weave some leather through it, because these people over there are walking barefoot, and they need something to walk on. And I'm like, holy moly, there's just so much potential here. And Langley School District could be this hub where there's sort of branches out. And where did this come from? Well, there's this school in Langley. British Columbia, Canada, you know that, way on the other side of the world. And we could do this. And I think it's something that it's worthwhile, that kids feel good about it, and away we go, right? So that's the way I'm thinking.
Trustee Todd.
First off, thank you, and I really want to congratulate you, because it is a tall order. I happen to have the pleasure of working with a teacher that did win the Prime Minister's Award, and you're an example. And I think what best describes it is you're inspiring, but you're also offering hope. And in a world that has difficulties, you offer hope. And it might be acting locally, but we know that's filtering out already, and soon it's going to be global. By chance, I happened to Staples, just asking to help my daughter, her phone, a screen protector. And I spoke to the manager there, and he said, I got talking about being a teacher, and he says, you know what? We just did a bunch of things. And he said, I said, oh, yeah, Walnut Grove. And he said, yeah, it's one of 10 schools in Canada that won this award. And it's a fantastic thing that's happening here in Langley. So congratulations to you, and I know congratulations to the people around you, and also to the students who offer that hope. Thank you.
And the students are very excited about these sort of things, and boy, they're fun to work with, because they got big ideas too. And they're willing to try stuff. They're not jaded yet, right? So they're willing to go for it, and that's a really fun thing to work with. I've never worked with adults my entire life. I mean, I work with you, and I work with, obviously I do. But you know what I mean? Like, on a day-to-day basis, my life is with teenagers. And it's what keeps me young, and it's why I don't own that many ties, and they're a fun age group to work with, and they inspire me. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And now we move to the Secretary Treasurer's report and the annual facilities grant for 2018-19. Mr. Isley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to, in your package, you have an update on the proposal for our annual facilities grant for the 18-19 AFG year, or the annual facilities grant year. The fiscal year for the AFG is run on the ministry year, which is April 1st to March 31st. So that doesn't line up with our school year, but it follows the ministry funding cycle. The ministry funds the annual facility grant from both their operating funds and their capital funds to give the total funding for schools to operate their facilities and to do upgrades as needed for those sites. This year, the operating portion is $680,000 and the capital portion is $2,663,000 for a total of $3,343,503. They take from that funding what they call CAMS, which is the capital asset management system that all districts have to contribute to as part of their annual facilities grant. This year for us, that's $57,898. Which leaves us a balance of $3,285,605. And there's a attachment in your package of the projected plan to be used for that. That equals that amount, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Hey, trustees, could we get a motion that the Board of Education approves the annual facilities grant for 2018-19 spending plan as presented? Moved by Trustee Dykeman, seconded by Trustee Ross. Any comments or questions on the report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That brings us to the annual budget bylaw for 2018-19. Mr. Isley.
Thank you. The budget tonight is for your first and second readings by legislation. Every school board needs to adopt an annual budget by June 30th of every year. And it has to be in line with the School Act and the format that we are now required to and have been required to do for the last years is under PSAB, which requires all funds to be reported, so capital, special purpose, special funds and operating funds. What the board officially approves is a consolidation of those three funds. Most of the information that we look at tonight will be in the operating funds, but we'll be going through all of them. Here's a listing of what is in the budget package. This is a ministry requirement that we fill out all these statements and schedules. The two statements, statement 2 and 4, are the consolidated amounts. The schedules that start with a 2 are operating, schedules with 3 are special purpose, and 4th are the capital funds. Wanted to start off with some of the considerations that we had when we prepared the budget this year. The main one is our enrollment numbers. We're projecting an increase of 277.6 FTE, which brings us now just over 20,600 FTE. Our ISP numbers, we are projecting those to be down slightly, 35 FTE. That is more for conservative nature due to the fact that we have space constraints. If we are able to accommodate more than the 990 students, we will do so. We do have a wait list accumulating for international students that want to attend but want to make sure that we have capacity in our schools to be able to handle our catchments and our local students. Our average teacher cost has gone up on average $535 to $93,594. That has a couple things in it with all the contractual increases. Also has the impacts of the changes of the MSP and the new 1.95% health tax that is going to be starting in January 1st of 2019. To offset some of those increased costs where we're paying both taxes at the same time, we are planning to take a premium holiday from our benefits. We've done this in the past where the premiums that the employer and the employee pay to have extended health and extended dental, the claims have been lower than the expected amounts by the provider, which creates a surplus in those funds, which will allow us to take holidays for a few months for our teachers and our QP staff, which will be a premium savings for the district, but also for the employee. And we'll be contacting our partner groups once we've sorted out how many months and what months those will be, but those will be starting most likely in October or November, but we have to still sort that out with our benefit provider, and once we have that, we will be contacting our partner groups. We've included all the benefit increase, full impact of late start positions. We've removed any one-time items and included all contractual increases and an estimated 2% increase for exempt staff and for administrators. Here's an overview of the combined budget of all the funds. You can see the operating fund is now over $200 million in revenue. You can see as a total district, we're looking at a budget of $245 million. Expenses, mostly in our operating, $239 million. In our operating, you can see that we are going to be appropriating $2.377 million to balance our budgets, and then I'll provide more details on that. Our special purpose funds always come to a balance as they are targeted funds. And our capital fund is in a surplus of 7.8, and that's just due to the timing that we receive funding for capital projects, offset by the time that we amortize the depreciation on buildings and land purchases and those sorts of things. The revenues for all the funds, you can see the bulk of our funds come from the Ministry of Education, $213 million approximately of the total funds come from them. Our next largest generation is tuition, which is mainly our ISP program. And then that is followed by other revenues, and you can see the majority of that is under special purpose fund, $6.7 million, which are the funds that schools receive at the local level for the funds that go through their local bank accounts. On the expense side, the bulk of our funds are spent on instruction. 197 million of our total expenditures are spent there. And you can see that most of our expenses, once again, are in our operating funds of 203 million of the 239 million that we project to spend. This is the actual bylaw that will be before you tonight for first and second readings, which shows the expenditures by fund and the total budget of $240 million that will need to be approved tonight. These are the operating schedules that we'll be going through a little more in detail. The revenue under our operating funds, as mentioned before, is just over $200 million. It's up just under $5.3 million from what we had in our amended budget. Our expenses are up just under $5.9 million compared to amended budget. And you can see that the appropriation has, in the fall, was 3.3, is now just under $2.4 million. Funding from the MOE has gone up $5.7 million, and I'll break that down for you more in a moment. Our tuition is down due to the fact that we have lower ISP numbers projected, and then we have a few other minor changes in our other revenue and investment incomes. The grant from the Ministry of Education is mainly driven by the enrollment. You can see that we're up $4.5 million. We're just under $1 million increases in identified students. And then I guess the other thing that I wanted to point out is the administrative savings was a program that the ministry had reduced funding to cut administrative costs over a 2-year period a few years back, and the second year they gave back to districts as a special grant. As you can see farther down in the presentation, those two offset. Those deductions and special grants have now been removed and are now included in our per student allocation, so that $851,000 is now sitting in that $4.5 million increase in per student amount. So you will not see that administrative savings item going forward. On the enrollment side, we are up 276.87 regular students. So when you look at the number of students, that would generate about $2 million in additional revenue. The rate changes that they've done, which cover off that administrative savings return, plus any contractual raises that were done for the partner groups, are in that rate change, and that is just under $2.5 million, and that's the bulk of the $4.5 million change in our enrollment-based funding. Tuition, as mentioned, is down for the ISP, but the summer program for the international student program is up slightly by $55,000. On the expense side, we are up $5.9 million, and I'll go into detail on all those variances on individual slides. First being the teachers, we've added 19.74 FTE into schools. The estimated impact of raises and salary increments for teachers is just under $1.9 million. Some of that has been offset by the fact that last year's we experienced savings on that budgeted cost versus what the actual teachers cost. We took some of that savings into our amended budget, but the $1 million is the remainder that we didn't put in our amended budget and is now reflected in our preliminary budget for 18-19. Annualization of some of the late starts is just over $500,000. We've put in a contingency for 3 divisions, so for any potential needed added divisions at the elementary in the middle. We've added 0.714 into FTE for a central career teaching position. We've added 1.144 to instructional services. 1.0 of that is a digital coach, and the rest are late starts and timing of a few positions that had happened during the past year for instructional services. And then we've added 1.6 FTE for tech plan. You'll see a few things popping up tonight with tech plan. We've put some money aside to try to make sure that we can implement some of the plans that we have for technology in the next couple of years, and we have some funds from the restricted surplus that we're using for that, which I will also show you later. There's 1.0 for special ed. That's a position that was in the budget 2 years ago. Person went on leave and we were not able to fill it last year, so it wasn't in the budget. So this is just that person returning. So it's not a new position, but it's an add back into the budget. And then there's about 58,000 other minor changes to get us to the 3.4 million. On the principals and vice principal side, there's been a wage increase. It's about 200,000. We have the full year impact of the district VP for child and youth in care that was added partway through last year. We have a career ed vice principal that is retired and that we're not replacing currently. And then we are looking at adding a tech plan vice principal to coordinate some of those changes that we're talking about in the tech plan going forward. For the education assistants, we have a contingency of $233,000 to identify for any more needs as we go through the remainder of this year and into September. The wage increases for them was about $363,000. Estimated some late starts or vacancy impacts for SEAs is just over $300,000. And then we added 11 SEAs in our allocation to schools for just under $345,000. For the support staff, increase in the vacation sick day payout of a small amount of $21,000. We've last year in the amended budget, we started that 6-man team for school initiatives on the maintenance side of things. This is the full year impact of that team that we've now implemented, which will be partially funded from a prior year's accumulated surplus. The full year impact of the maintenance mechanic that's being added. And once again, for the tech plan, we are adding 2 IT staff to facilitate the back end of that implementation. We also added a few positions that were either new to IT or had been vacant for the year, and that's the $63,000, the full year impact of that. We also, with the volume of purchasing and the fact that we're building 2 schools that need to be filled with furniture and equipment, we've added a budgeted position for purchasing staff to accommodate that increase in our procurement. We also have wage increases of just over $300,000 for that group. Other professionals, we have the full year impact of the IT supervisor and also the full year impact of the maintenance manager of info security that we added in the preliminary budget, as well as wage increases of just under $58,000. Substitutes, I know there's a lot of numbers there. Wanted to show it a couple ways. Normally when we do the preliminary budget, we see it drop substantially from what the amended budget amount was, which it did drop this year, but only by about $140,000. You can see compared to last year's preliminary budget at just under $6.4 million, we're now at almost $7.1 million, which is a sizable increase. A lot of that being the TTOC greater than 3 days. Last year we took that number down because we were so short TTOCs that we weren't able to fulfill all those needs. So we've put back the levels to what we think we need to fulfill those vacancies as we go through the year. So unlike usual, we haven't seen a decline in the amended to the preliminary budget that we normally do due to the drop off in the vacancies. You do see the decline in the vacancies, but it's been offset by the increase in the TTOC costs. On the supply side, a fair number of changes. These are some of the larger ones. ISP commissions are lower. We have less students, but we also only pay commissions on new students, so we have a higher percentage of returning versus new. The township parking requirement that we did for Yorkson Creek Middle School, so that we were able to put portables on our school parking lot and then have a spot for staff to park. That was our contribution to that arrangement with the township, which was a one-time item. The international student program, the medical fees lower because of less students, but also we had a one-time bill for students for special coverage for the the summer program that we needed for that, which was a one-time item, which is now included in the ongoing. That was a bit of the transition between the MSP coverage and the coverage that we now pay for directly to a benefits provider. The tech plan added about $83,000 to our leasing costs for technology for next year. We did a risk assessment that has now come out of the budget at $33,000. Looking at refreshing our cell phones, which is roughly $32,000. We had one-time LPVPA Pro D fund that we set up for them last year at $40,000. We've done a rental of a truck, as we've added 12 casual labor people to do some of the work around our schools during the summer, and they needed more vehicles to be able to do that. So we've rented 2 or 3 maintenance vehicles for the summer months to accommodate that. Some changes in our ISP transportation costs. Our supply budgets and our central accounts have gone down by $62,000. And our innovation grant, which we increased in our amended budget from $150,000 and to $200,000, which we took from restricted surpluses, we have now put back down to the original $150,000. Our NGN, which is our network bandwidth, is the cost on that the ministry is back charging us has gone down a little bit this year by $28,000. The big one is the student learning grants. That was that one-time fund that from not this year, but the year prior, this is the amount that was left, so that's coming out. And then you'll see a large decrease in the school supply budgets of $672,000. The big decrease there is the schools are allowed to carry over surpluses from year to year. Those come out when we do the amended budget. And if they do carry over funds from this year, that'll get added back to the fall. But also with a lot of the late starts and vacancies that schools were experiencing, there was more funds in schools to be able to spend on supplies. We let schools keep more than what we would normally let them do as a one-time thing due to all the issues that we had in the startup this year with staffing. And then we have about $131,000 for the utility increases. Just another way of showing the breakdowns of the previous categories, but as you can see, the bulk of the funds we spend on instruction. Of the $5.9 million, 4.6 of it is instruction, $500,000 to admin, and then operations and maintenance about $709,000. We also have to budget for our special purpose funds. PSAB defines that as funds that we receive that we have some sort of obligation or a liability to repay or to provide a special service. So we have a bunch of those funds that we have. Here's the listing of those funds. This is the revenue that we had in the preliminary and the amended. You can see that our special purpose funds have gone down by $4.3 million. The big change there is in the fact for the ones at the top there, a lot of those have to do with the fact that in the amended budget, any funds from the previous year that weren't spent carry forward. So those carry forwards have now been removed. For the priority measures and the classroom enhancement fund, those funds have been for districts. They have given 80% of the allocation that was given to them in the prior year. They have asked for information from the district on the requirements, which we have provided to them. We hope to hear in late June or early July what that would be. Right now, there is no funding announced to us for remedy or overhead. For the remedy, they have said that they will be recalculating that, obviously, based on whatever happens at the end of September 30th. Until then, we're to be doing best efforts. In October, they will be asking us for our estimate of what the remedy costs will be for the 18-19 school year. The one that I do need to point out is that they haven't provided us any funds currently for our overhead costs. Last year we had $896,000. We have submitted a request for $892,000, but at this point they have not announced any funding for overhead. They have said that there is funds for the overhead component, but haven't given any indication of what that would be on a district by district basis or even on a provincial basis. So those $892,000 are costs that the district has that are not in a budget anywhere. So that is a potential risk that trustees need to be aware of, that any funding that they don't provide in overhead for that $892,000 we will have to consider when we do our amended budget in the fall. So I just wanted to make you aware of that there are costs that are not in the budget, and it is because we haven't been given any indication on what they will and will not be funding for overhead. Schedule 4 is our capital funding, and these are some of the changes. We had a lot of items in our amended budget that we put in. Some of that was due to one-time funding. Some of it was funded from our operating fund to buy capital projects. Last year that was $2.2 million. This year the $683,000 that you see there is all funded from operating. The ones that we're looking at for this year is DW Poppy with the middle school conversion. We wanted to set aside some funds there to be able to start making some changes to that facility, so we'll be working with that school to make some changes to that building. That $500,000 was an amount that was previously restricted by the board for infrastructure, and will be now a motion that you will need to do to unrestrict that fund for that amount. And you can see some of the things that have come out as one time. There was the small gym at LSS, a bunch of furniture for school, the track at Walnut Grove, the boiler upgrade, and then a big one being the portables that we installed the past year. This here is a slide of what we showed you when we did the amended budget for this school year, of what our accumulated operating surplus looked like based on the budgeted deficit of $3.3 million. So you can see the balance of June 30th, 2017 is how we finished the last school year, and the amounts that we had appropriated to balance off the budget for 17-18, and what we project to have as accumulated surplus at June 30th, 2018, assuming that we finish the year in a $3.3 million deficit. So that would leave us with internally board restricted of just under $8.6 million and an unrestricted amount of just under $5 million and a total of just under $13.6. Here is that same $13.6 million that we assume that we're going to end the year at, and the appropriations that we would need for this year to balance the preliminary budget. The first one being the $500,000, which I had mentioned is the monies for doing some work at DW Poppy. The $450,000 is the tech plan that we had talked about. So we had a surplus that we'd restricted of $900,000, which we're looking at using it over a 2-year period to fund those positions to further the tech plan in the district. And then the district initiative to support schools is $250,000 of prior surplus that we'd also used for that school initiative, school request team of those 6 staff members that are now in our budget. So a good portion of that is covered off of prior year surplus for this year. Will be an ongoing cost pressure until we look at that. Then we would need just under $1.2 million from the unrestricted surplus to balance off our budget. If you recall, when we did our preliminary budget last year, we restricted $899,000 approximately from our unrestricted. So we're a couple $100,000 higher this year from our unrestricted than we would be from last year's unrestricted. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Isley. Trustee Dyke.
Thank you. My question was already answered. It was going to be related to the $7 million in substitute costs, but you provided a detailed explanation, so that was wonderful. Thank you.
Trustee Ross.
Well, Mr. Isley, this is your first budget with us in this new role as Secretary Treasurer. Previously, there were David Green budgets, but this is entirely you. So I applaud you and the work of your team for presenting us today. I typically would ask this question, and it's called, what keeps you awake at night? What are you concerned about? These are numbers to us, but you know, behind them there's a story. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
I think what concerns me is some of the unknowns to the district when it comes to things like the Classroom Enhancement Fund and what our district needs to contribute to some of the capital requirements that we have. We have a healthy accumulated surplus, but the concern is how much do you spend of that when you don't know what you're going to have to contribute to a bunch of unknowns. And with the growth that we have up in the Willoughby area, the fact that we now have growth in the city, Walnut Grove continues to not flatline but slightly grow, and now we have the development in Brookswood and Fernridge. The capital contributions that potentially could be asked for of this district concern me.
Okay, good. If I could just ask a subsequent question, a couple of things. The community link funding has gone down. Now, is that a concern for you? Because that's really important to us, and it's sizable $200,000.
Yeah, the community link funding only has gone down in the fact that the amended budget had unspent funds from the previous year, which was added to that. The funding has not gone down year over year. It's just basically because of the carry forward from the previous year.
Now, I know you mentioned remedy, and we really don't know what that's going to look like, so that's probably something that's keeping you awake, but more on that later, I'm assuming.
So the remedy one is not as big a concern for me because the ministry has committed to re-looking at that once we know what our remedy situation will be for next school year. The one that is concerning is the silence on the overhead, and all districts are in that boat right now because they haven't given any indication whether the funding will be similar to last year, cut from last year, or what. So we've been all asked to put in our requests, which we have done, which is around the same number as last year, just slightly less, but we wait to hear hopefully later in June, if not July.
Okay. And my final question, if I could, is for $500,000 at Poppy, what do you get for $500,000 these days? I mean, construction costs are so high. What was your intention of spending that money on?
We don't have a definitive plan at this point. There are some things that we're looking at as potential if we can free up space of making. One of the thoughts we had was making space for the elementary students to come up to start to experience the middle school concept with explorations and those kind of things. If we can free up space and create those kind of places that we could bus kids up to start doing that until we can get to the middle school model in there. There's some refreshing things that we can do, create some collaboration space. So there's a fair number of little things that we can do for that. You're right when it comes to construction costs. If you're doing a major construction project, $500,000 doesn't get you very far. But with those littler projects, we feel that we can at least start making a dent in that school.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Trustee Todd.
Thank you. Congratulations, too, on your detailed budget. I know I tease you that sometimes it may keep you awake, and it may be difficult sometimes to keep us awake, the financials. But I am curious. You highlighted a number of things, and certainly in terms of expenditures, there's been a substantial growth. We are a growing district. I kind of highlighted a few of them, but certainly it seems like technology is a major initiative. And in terms of strategic planning, maybe you want to touch upon areas that are growing and areas that we are committing new dollars to.
Well, I think technology is not a new area that we've committed to. We've started quite an ambitious tech plan when it comes to the hardware side of things. Putting devices in teachers' hands, putting devices in students' hands. But what we're finding is that everyone's kind of doing this off the corner of their desk. And there's a lot of things in technology that need dedicated time to do them well. We're looking at implementing Skype across our district. We're looking at Office 365 across our district, continuing with the tech rollout of all these devices. Even started talking about digitization along the lines of Tim, of trying to get rid of some of the paper in our system. All those things are things that require dedicated time and energy to be able to do and do properly. So when we sat down and started looking at it, we realized that you know, the way we were going, we were not going to be able to accomplish them and accomplish them well. We had a restricted surplus there that we looked at. You know, if we said 2 years, what could we do, and what kind of resources could we dedicate it, and you know, for 2 years to be able to get some of these things kickstarted. So that's one that we've definitely put funds into for this year. Trying to think, is there any other one you're specifically wanting to know about, or?
No, I think you've answered most of it. I did see some increased expenditures, certainly in maintenance at the schools and during the summer program. My other question, this is more of a concern, because I dislike going there, areas of concern, but certainly we know there's going to be capital pressures. We have, you know, the Willoughby area that's going to, and there may be additional monies that we may have to bring to a capital thing. Is there areas that maybe not necessarily keep you awake at night, but you know, land purchases, the actual capital costs, and is there any direction that you receive from the ministry?
On the purchase of land, they have changed ministry policy on that. They do not require districts to contribute more than what they have in their land capital, which it comes from the DCCs, or the construction fees that are paid through the township and the city for developments. So once that fund is depleted, we just basically receive those funds from the city and the township. They go into a land capital account, and then when we look at to purchase a piece of land, they ask what's in that account, and then they fund the remainder of that. So from land, I don't have any concerns. For building on those pieces of land, the policy right now is they're looking for district contributions of up to 50%, which on a $20–25 million elementary school starts to add up to a fair chunk of funds for a district. So those do concern me, because I do know with the number of things that we have, and we will be bringing the 5-year capital plan to the June meeting, and that'll be part of some of that conversation, is some of the capital that we are going to require in the next couple of years to build some of the schools that we need in some of our growth areas. So that is a concern.
Trustee McVeigh.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for your work on this preliminary budget. Sort of following on the theme of Trustee Todd, I do see a lot of new expenditure, but expenditure that I believe really falls in line with the strategic plan and the things that this board has talked about and been committed to doing, and addressing the needs of a very rapidly growing district in order to make some of the magic happen in schools that we've seen tonight. The examples of that, you need people behind the scenes, and you need maintenance people, and you need IT people, and you need purchasing people, and you need, of course, the teachers and the SEAs and administration, but you need the people in this building and on the ground doing the things that support the work in the schools. And so I see a lot of that in the budget, which does very much align with the things that we as a board have talked about. So I'm excited about the direction of this budget. I see it being very positive for our school district, and look forward to the feedback that will be available for the next couple of weeks before we actually vote on it. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo Mr. Isley's comments and concerns around, especially the classroom enhancement fund, and receiving 80%, not receiving 20%, at least at this point, not receiving any money for the overhead. Pleased to hear you've got confidence around the remedy, but I'll feel more confident when we actually receive the money. But also, yeah, well, like it doesn't take an awful lot of projecting to know we continue to need more schools, and we need another elementary school pretty darn quick. And yeah, we contributed 20%, I think it was, to the new high school. If you project a similar number for the next elementary school, as you say, that's a lot of money, and a concern laid on top of the Classroom Enhancement Fund uncertainty. So hopefully we'll get some more clarity from Victoria around all of those items, because I know in terms of the input that is being received around the funding formula review, that I think school districts are pretty unanimous in saying that one of the things we need most is more predictability over multiple years so that we can do better planning and don't have to, hold as much money in reserve, not knowing, is this or is this not coming next year. So good to see we're growing. Good to see more students, and overall a good positive picture. But there's always things to worry about, and right now there seems to be a little more than usual amount of uncertainty. Seeing no further speakers, trustees, could we get a motion that the School District 33 Langley 2018-19 annual budget bylaw in the amount of $240,670,754 be given first reading? Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Trustee Ross. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? And now could we get a motion that the School District 35 Langley 2018-19 annual budget bylaw in the amount of $240,670,754 be given second reading? Moved by Trustee Degman, seconded by Trustee McVeigh. Other comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that brings us to the information items and the trustee indemnity, Mr. Isley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your package, you have some information on the process that has been done for the trustee indemnity. As per policy 1400, we are required to have a proposal for the outgoing board to vote on for the incoming board's salary for the next term. Part of that policy is to strike a community committee to review that process, and we were lucky enough to have a group do that, and we have Tom Louie here tonight to go through that for us, and I just want to thank Tom and his committee for the work that they've done. They've put in a lot of effort into this and done a great job of proposal. I did want to highlight that Mr. Louie was part of the in-camera meeting earlier this evening, where he went through a similar presentation with more detail. We don't have permission to share all the comparables that he shared with the board, so not all those will be shared this evening, but he will go through the process and his thought process and the recommendations, and then basically we will allow trustees to ask questions on from Mr. Louie, and we will then bring this back on the June the 19th meeting for the board to discuss further and to hopefully make a decision on the indemnity for the trustees for the incoming board. But we wanted to give you some time to be able to digest this information before you had to decide on it. So without further ado, I hand it over to Mr. Louie.
Thank you, Brian. Before I start, I just want to go back to what the teacher that got the award. I was very fortunate to do believe it or not, an engineering career presentation to about 50 students at Walnut Grove. And the subject of the plastic brick came up. So I just told Balam that that's what happened there. So yeah, the counselor reached out to the association to ask someone to come and talk about future careers, basically, right? So they said, okay, Tom, since you've done a couple of these already in Abbotsford and the library, would you be interested in talking to some students? So off I went, and your brick thing came up. I thought that was, so I told the teacher that, well, if you want, we did talk about what can be used on the brick, blah, 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 and it was a good hour and a half that I spent with them. You guys are in good hands. There's some bright students on there. They're really good, and they were really interested in future careers in engineering, and hopefully I inspire some of them to go into different fields that they can go into, not just civil, but a whole bunch of different fields. But anyways, let's go back to this report. Thank you, Brian and Gordon, for the opportunity for my committee to work on this report for you guys. We spent a lot of time going through a lot of information. So tonight I'm just going to highlight the report, some of the things that we looked at, some of the recommendations that we came to agreement on, and tonight, the other two committee members, Bruce and Marcia, they're not able to be here. Marcia is in Italy, enjoying some nice wine and vacation with her husband. And Bruce is in Arizona with his family, so you're stuck with me. So off I go. Okay, so obviously we're going to look at the trustee indemnity, the salary that we'll be paying for future board, and effective December 2018, and moving forward to 2019 for the next 4 years after that. Okay, the committee members, Marcia, myself, and Bruce, and I believe you have the bio for the three of us, so I won't go into any detail. So this is the report that I'm going to highlight, basically table of content, a bit of background, the information that we looked at, and some of the committee findings and recommendation, and some of the most significant impact is the change in the 2017 federal budget, which actually did away with the tax benefit, some of the salaries, not just for you guys, but for the councillors and mayors, the various cities in BC. So they were also impacted by the federal government 2017 federal budget. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. So a bit of background, in doing the research, our committee that, looked at some of the background information. Some of the stuff I pull off your district website. It was some interesting reading for the three of us. You guys are the 6th largest district in BC. You about 2,500 full-time and part-time staff. And believe it or not, you've grown since, and, last time you guys looked at it, you guys actually surpassed, previous district like Victoria and Richmond. You guys actually have more students than them now, basically. So, the enrollment has changed throughout BC, and you guys are on the increase, and some of the other larger school districts are actually going the other direction, okay? The establishment, how much you guys get paid, is not governed by any federal or provincial statute, including the School Act. There's nothing actually in those acts that actually tell you how much we should be paying. So the only reference that we found was the clause in the Federal Income Tax Act, and that's a section there where they actually identify the portion of the salary that you people receive, along with the mayor and councillor, that 1/3 of that salary is non-taxable, and therefore 2/3 of that is taxable. And then obviously that's been done away with the 2017 federal budget. So now 100% the salary that you guys get, the mayor and the council get, will be taxable, okay? So basically, you're no different than the other school board in BC, in the other districts. You're left on your own to determine how much you guys will get paid. But a lot of school districts do have a policy governing how they're going to determine salary. And you guys have a policy here, and it's 1,400. So that information was provided to the committee, so we followed that policy. Here are some of the information that we looked at. Some were provided to us by Gordon and Brian. Our committee also requested some additional information so we can fill in some of the gaps and have a better understanding of how to determine the actual salary, make sure it's fair, equitable, and all the factors before the more information we looked at, so we can make a better informed decision, coming up with some recommendation. So I'll quickly go through some. You can see for yourself, the first 4 bullets are your current policy, and the one that we follow is 1,400. We also looked at some of your board and committee meeting schedule to get an idea of the hours that you guys spent going to some of these functions. We also looked at other school districts, some of their operating budget, number of students that they have, and compensation, again, to get a comparative in terms of where you guys stand relative to other school districts in BC. List of public events that you guys attend on a regular basis. We also asked for some outside information, just to look at, okay, the city of Langley and the township of Langley in terms of how do they compensate their mayor and councillor, because they are also impacted by the 2017 federal budget. So some changes in there. And then we also look forward a bit in terms of looking at the actual future growth of this district. We looked at some of your Beauregard information, which Brian provided, in terms of where you guys are heading in the next 5 to 10 years, basically down the road. We also looked at the BC School Trust Association, Trustees Association website to look at some of your guys' roles and responsibility. Some of that have actually been identified in some of the previous board policy that you guys have, but we also did a due diligence and we talked to some of the actual association. We also looked at some of the method of calculating the impact of the tax changes. So we looked at some of this personal tax calculator. Obviously, we found the Income Tax Act. That was actually, that's the 1/3, 2/3 taxable and non-taxable benefit. We looked at the School Act just to make sure that, okay, how do you determine compensation and what information we can gather from that act. We also went on to some of the, your website to look at some of the minutes that's been posted on there to get the breadth of some of the issues that you guys deal with, some of the policy, the bylaws, regulation that you guys have to understand. And I heard some of that tonight as well, too, in your budget presentation. The consultation with the School Trustees Association staff, we consulted with them. We talked to some of the people there and that association to get a sense of how other school districts are dealing with this issue, to make sure that what we're doing sort of makes sense and is on the right track, that we're not doing something really out of the box thinking type of thing. So we talked to them as well to get what to do. So after we looked at all that information, this is some of our findings and recommendation, how we move forward. The committee recognized that you guys, all of you, bring a wide range of skills, experience, knowledge, and values, beliefs, and opinions to this role as being a trustee. And it's good that there's a varying opinion between each of you guys that brings a different perspective, different view, and that makes a better decision-making, very democratic, in our opinion. So we thought that's good. Not one person stands out, say this is how we're going to do it, but everybody's knowledgeable, different experience, a different look at things. From the information from outside of the school district, we found out that the city of Langley has already made changes for 2019 to cover their mayor and councilor salary. So even though Mayor Schaefer's not running, the incumbent next year will get a big hefty increase to compensate for that impact and the tax changes, okay? As well as the councilor. The township of Langley, I think we found out they're going to put a process in place to determine what they're going to do. So that's work in progress with them. In terms of how the committee looked at it, we took a two-step process in terms of determining the salary. We first looked at the comparative step first to make sure that you guys are actually comparable with other school districts in the Lower Mainland. We actually went outside the Lower Mainland because in terms of your enrollment, because you're actually increasing. A lot of the district in the Fraser Valley have actually gone the other way. So some of the district that was used for comparison previously are no longer applicable. So we said, okay, let's look beyond that. Let's look for districts that are actually the same enrollment data that you guys have. So so that was the first step, to make sure that you guys are comparative with other school districts. Now, since the school district operating budget is based on student enrollment, it made a lot of sense in actually to link your salary to enrollment. Okay, and I heard that a couple of times even from the news, from the people in Surrey, Mr. Wilson there, Sean, basically he was saying, well, you look at our population, our enrollment is so high, it's about 70,000 students that they have, so in that range, they say, we're worth that much, our salary, because we got a lot of issues with that type of enrollment, the amount of staff that we have, type of thing that they deal with. So it just makes sense to link those two, rather than just being very subjective about it and say, well, okay, we're going to pick this number, and these are the districts we looked at. You got to have some linkage that you can actually repeat the process over and over again. The second step that we're going to take is that comparative salary, okay, then we're going to apply the tax changes that the federal government made, and we're going to cancel that change, cancel that impact. And through our consultation with the BC School Trustees Association, basically, the input we got from them was that a lot of school districts are doing that. You know, what they heard talking to their at conferences, at workshops, school districts are going to do that because it just makes sense to negate that change. So that was the second process that we did, to go through an iterative process to figure out what sort of a lump sum that we're going to put into the add that to the comparative salary to cancel that 1/3 at the impact of the tax. And then in our research, we also found that a lot of school districts have actually included this CPI, Consumer Price Index. It's more of an inflation type of thing, to recognize there's an inflation factor to salary that we have to compensate for that. So the committee is recommending that we're going to do that every January 1st, follow the CPI index and apply that to the salary automatically January 1st of each year. So there you find, so this is the salary. This is the comparative salary that you see, the new rate for the trustee, the vice chair, and the chair as of December 1st, 2018. Committees recommend this is the new salary. Obviously, it's a little different than the other one, and that's to compensate for that taxable benefits that's been taken away by the federal government. Take-home pay, same, basically, before, after the tax. We're also going to recommend to you guys, to the board, to look at maybe clarifying your current policy in terms of the current method. It's sort of left up to the people to interpret what is the current method. We thought it would be good to actually do that linkage between salary and enrollment, have that worked into that policy, mention that is tied to enrollment versus leaving as current method. It's Appendix B. This is the actual calculation that we did using the personal tax calculator that we use that tells you the current salary. You can see that before and after tax changes, there's actually a loss of take-home pay of $1,500. That 2/3, 1/3. This is the new comparative salary calculation, fully taxable versus change. If there's no change in the federal government thing, that would be $26,693, and you can see there's a loss, take-home pay of $2,075. That change, it is significant when you think about, if you look at even the township of Langley, and their salary is pretty big, and if you take that 1/3 in there, that's a pretty big impact when you think, I don't know how they're going to wrestle with their issue, but that's their problem. But it's going to be a tough one for them to sort out, I think. And this is the where we actually did the iterated process where we actually kept on putting a different lump sum in there to cancel out the tax change, and then we came up to adding another $2,800 to the chair salary, come up with the new chair salary of about $30,000. That would negate the tax impact. So anyway, so those are our recommendations, and questions that clarification that you may want.
Thank you, Mr. Louie. Trustee Coburn.
Hi, thank you for your committee work. It's a really thorough report. I notice, I do like how you've tied the pay and the rate of pay and the increase with student enrollment, and that's one way of doing it. It's a really, rigorous method. I'm just wondering if you've noticed any correlation between cost of living and salary, and do you think it would be advisable or wise to maybe look at other ways of tying increase other than just to enrollment of student?
We did look at different way, but we're trying to come up with a way that you can actually repeat, with numbers that you actually have, versus what other school district or what we heard from the BCSTA say. A lot of them, what they heard is more subjective. And a lot of them actually do use the comparative method. By and large, the majority. Actually, I didn't come across any that said no. They have to compare somehow. It's how they select, and that comes to very subjective. I want to pick big school district if it's more money, right? You take the average type of thing, right? But there's no linkage. You can change that each year or each 4 years. So we thought, okay, we need a process that you can actually come up with and say, okay, we're going to take a ratio of the salary, of the chair salary versus enrollment, and then if enrollment goes up, salary goes up. Enrollment goes down, then because you're dividing that ratio, and then your salary goes up. Right? So you can. We figure it's more defendable, I guess. That's what we felt. And then asking other school districts and how they do it, they say, well, we just pick a number, which is very,
my follow-up is, do you think that it's possible to tie increase to cost of living in an area? So I know you can't discuss too much there's some stuff that can't be, shared, but do you think that there is a link in some of the districts between like the cost of living in a particular area versus the increase tied to a particular salary? So as the cost of living in an area, do you think that's justifiable or even doable, as opposed to linking it to just student enrollment?
We asked that question to someone, again, with the BCSTA, and in terms of some of the school districts that did not use CPAs, a lot of them do use that because that's a calculated number that the federal government do use, and is specific for certain locale. You can actually pin it to an area. And some school districts have actually used it the same wage increases that the staff gets. They've actually tried that too. We've heard, one district actually did that, right? So everybody gets the same, versus whereas the numbers is calculated by some other people in a basket of food. This is the inflation. And we just thought, the most simpler method, independent method, versus the negotiated method with salary increases that may happen in some school districts. So we debate about that, which process, but we just want a recognition that there's an inflation factor that we have to include. What's the fairest way to get that? Negotiate it, or have the federal government calculate it for us, with just a basket of, or whatever, that they calculate CPI. So hopefully I'll answer your question, but that's a tough one, but it's a tough one. Okay.
Thank you. So you talked about a two-part process, and this is kind of the demystifying part, because trustees, like councillors, the budget was passed, a year passed, and then they kind of found out the fine print that it would impact councillors and trustees, and basically 1/3 of our indemnity was deemed tax-free.
Correct.
And so a portion of what you're talking, because it does look on paper like a sizable increase, but actually a portion of this increase is because of that tax change, which basically is revenue neutral. I don't know if that's a great term, but just maybe can you explain again for our audience out there and for our people nearby how that income tax change also equated to like a portion of this increase?
Okay, let me answer that question. We had a philosophical discussion as to, should we be giving politicians, people that run for public office, I guess, you do it for different reasons, okay? Should you be penalized by the tax change, I guess, basically, right? Type of thing. So we at committee felt that no, you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be, because, and by the same token, we thought the increase was fair in terms of actually, the amount is very small, I guess, basically, right, for the work that you guys do, basically. And And the two-step process that we used was, I think we thought was valid, the fact that we made the assumption that that's the only salary that you guys deal with, that you get for being a trustee. You know, we don't consider your second job, your third job, or whatever on top of that, right? Because I don't know the impact of that on the tax that when you file your income tax. But I can't deal with that amount type of thing. So we felt that was a two-step process was good. The fact that we have to figure out the impact and then not to penalize what people considering running, oh, now I got to pay tax on 1/3. You know, and the committee felt, given the information that we looked at, the time that you guys put in, that we just felt that you shouldn't be penalized councillors, mayors, or trustees, you know, by the federal government, basically. So hopefully hope I did answer your question, sort of. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Deckman.
Okay, now that I've saved my computer. It's good. Don't know where the music came from, though, because that's not my music. It's possessed now, but it's working. So thank you so much for your presentation and for the work that the committee did. I mean, that was extensive. The reports were so detailed and followed, so they were so easy to read. And I remember when we brought this in, it was last term, and one of the challenges that trustees face and any locally elected boards is you kind of get into this vicious circle where you're going around and it comes forward and you're supposed to review your indemnity, but there's no real guidelines on how the indemnity should work, and then you almost get into this strange standoff situation because one district's looking at you and waiting for a district to go, and there's no methodical approach. And so one of the things that we discussed is the previous board discussed was, well, let's take away this challenge at the beginning of each term of us sitting there saying, well, you know, what should we be paid, you know, and the views that would be so differing, and you know, all of us are here for the right reasons, but at the same time, one of the things with the current structure is that our indemnity with that 1/3 stops us from applying for like every little expense and creating a board of bookkeepers, which is what happens when everybody has to walk around with their logbook and keep their mileage. Right now it's like, okay, no, you're not claiming your mileage to come to your board meeting from your house because that's in your 1/3. So being faced with how we were going to approach the indemnity, the decision of the previous board was to put it to a committee and be thinking about the next board. Not all of the board is going to be here. Some of us, the public, may decide we shouldn't be here. So you're setting it for the next board. So it creates an entirely different lens when you're looking at it. So I can only speak for myself, but I know I didn't know what this was going to look like. So seeing the incredible amount of work and time and thought and weighted options that you put in with your committee, I'm extremely grateful for. I'm just like to thank you for that.
Just to put you at ease, the policy, I believe it was Central Okanagan, their policy, we looked at that 1/3 that you're talking about, the things that you don't keep track of, their policy is very quite clear as to what that 1/3 covers.
Yeah.
So what we did, we took that 1/3 and said, okay, we're going to put a dollar value to that 1/3. Setting up a home office, yeah, there's internet, mileage, even has some lunch expenses in there worked into as well. It was surprising when we actually we were very conservative in our estimate of the amount for each of those things that their policy governed. And believe it or not, it came to pretty close to that 1/3. And I was shocked. I said, holy smoke, you know, that's exactly what, you know, so why keep track of it?
In follow-up to that, I remember the first year I served as trustee, I actually did keep track of them all.
Yeah.
And I could say that all of us in different years, depending on what's going on, have been out of pocket beyond the 1/3 that is supposed to be our expenses. And that's okay. We all sign up for this to serve our community. But to see a group that isn't in the same situation as many other politicians sort of being lumped into the same thing and saying from MLAs to trustees, like no more indemnity. It does create and with these sorts of policies, you create a nation of bookkeepers.
Yeah,
and it's
it
going to
does.
cost the district and the public more.
That's what we didn't want to make any work for branch staff to track all these things, which is exactly what happened in Sir Okanagan. I talked to her, holy smoke, that's a lot of bookkeeping, right?
It is.
To do for, I don't know how many trustees they have, but it's, no, that's just, again.
No, it wouldn't be fair, and it can't be passed on to the public.
No, so, trust you guys to manage your books, and you do it.
Well, thank you for bringing your diverse groups, the diverse perspectives of each of the members of the committee to the table and taking such a critical approach to it. I'm very grateful for it.
You're welcome. Yeah, like I said, we enjoy working, and again, except both Marsha and Bruce, they want to thank you for asking us to do it, and we were happy to do it. So thanks again. So.
Yes, thank you to the three of you.
Okay,
and
thanks.
Trustees, now we need a motion. The Board of Education receive the Secretary Treasurer's information items as presented, moved by Trustee Dykeman, seconded by Trustee Ross. Other comments? Sorry, did I miss you, Trustee McVeigh? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? That brings us to the superintendent's reports and the framework for enhanced student learning. Mr. Stewart.
Thank you. And at this point, I'd like to call on Director of Instruction Don Tomlinson to step forward. We're doing all kinds of work around Learning Commons lately, and we've got some outstanding people here to share how that's evolving, and I'll turn it over to you, Don.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to have two of our district teacher librarians present to you tonight. Share with you some of the work that's been going on in our district around Learning Commons. I want to say before they start, there's a lot of work to be done out there. We had so many new teacher librarians that needed a lot of support. Deb Callan has been a huge support for these teacher librarians. Monica Spreitzer just came on recently and adding to the mix, and we're very excited to have her continue on with us. I also want to just take this opportunity to thank Deb for all the work. Deb is retiring at the end. She really is this time. But I do want to just say it's been a pleasure working with her, and I know when I talk to teacher librarians around the district how supported they feel right now, and that is so important when they're doing such valuable work in our schools. So I've asked Deb and Monica to share a few things that have been going on in the district and some of the changes that are happening around Learning Commons.
It is such a pleasure to be here this evening to share with you all the exciting things that have been happening in our Learning Commons this year. It's a big change for Langley. To start off, I'm Deb Callan, this is Monica. Hello. This little graph shows how we are just about at 100% having a teacher librarian in every one of our schools this year. That was a big change from previous years. We are just missing a teacher librarian at one middle school, and that is not because we haven't been trying. You know that there is a shortage of qualified teachers and teacher librarians in every place. So we hired over 21 different teachers, 20 of them for our elementary and one new middle school. The secondaries all had a TL when we started the year. So we're in good shape, and we know that we will have 100% staffing for September.
One of the things we just wanted to take a moment to talk about is the terminology, Learning Commons. It's something that's thrown around, and there's a lot of confusion around it. We prefer the term Library Learning Commons because we really feel that the library hasn't been replaced, it's been enhanced. So this little graph, it's a little bit hard to read, but it just shows you sort of the key components of what a Learning Commons needs to be a Learning Commons. And probably one of the #1 items on the left-hand side there is a flexible physical space. So furniture that can be reconfigured, easily moved, rolling bookshelves. Also a virtual presence, technology. You'll see a lot of that in our slideshow, collaborative partnerships, and of course, we still have the need for our traditional information and digital literacies. At the very bottom of the car graph there that we borrowed from the BCTLA, it does say, though, that one of the most important parts of a learning commons is a trained staff, a trained teacher librarian running the space.
So we are pretty lucky in Langley. We started off the year, we already have 6 of our teacher librarians have completed their masters in teacher librarianship. We have 3 more that have enrolled at the master's program at the U of A. So they're doing some great things. About 10 of our TLs have completed. Minimum requirement would be a certificate, being 5 courses in teacher librarianship. A diploma would be 10. So we have, at most 10 of people have completed their certificate or diploma, and many, it's 8 more are currently enrolled in their certificate programs. Coursework would be through UBC or through Queen's. And we have another group that is committed. This was their first year, so they it was try it on, see how it fit. And we're excited that most of the teachers are signed up for coursework to start in September, and they're going to be starting their 2nd year at their schools. And then we have, of course, there's always some change, so we have some new spaces and unknowns, so we're not sure who will be in some of the schools at this time. But probably one of the most exciting things that Langley can be proud of is how many of our master's teachers are teaching at UBC. Richard is here this evening, actually. Richard Beaudry's right here. He's teaching the UBC some of the coursework. And Joni Proska's working for Queen's University and has actually developed the first 3 of the 5 courses that just started this year. So she's written the courses, and now she's teaching them, and she's recruiting. Allison Hewitt is a retired, or perhaps re-retired soon, teacher librarian from Langley. She's going to be teaching. And then we also have Sandra Averill, who you've known more from maybe our technology. She actually wrote for Queen's as well, one of the teacher librarian courses incorporating technology into the Learning Commons program. So we can be pretty proud of how our Langley teachers are moving forward and sharing the knowledge. So that's the hub of the school that we're talking about, our Library Learning Commons.
Excellent. If we had a theme for our presentation, it would be flexible learning spaces. We've just got a whole bunch of different Langley Learning Commons here for you to look at. Flexible spaces with rich and varied learning opportunities. So we just wanted to take a few minutes to show you some of the neat things that are happening, our highlights of the year, I guess you could say. So here, this is Aldergrove Community Secondary School's library before their recent renovation. So this is pretty exciting to see how that space was reimagined. Notice the different levels of seating, and also you can't see all of the space, of course, but a lot of the tables are different shapes and they can be reconfigured to rectangles, small groups, collaboration. So it's pretty exciting. Another thing that many of our teacher librarians are involved in is supporting digital literacy and also the design curriculum, the ADST curriculum. So you'll see here reality viewers, drones, all of these elements that are being used actually in the library, and the teacher librarian is in many cases responsible for green screen filming. The top picture here, this is Lynn Fritz Elementary, and a couple of things to notice about it. First of all, notice how the space has been cleared because they have flexible furniture that's easy to move. And they're doing coding and robotics. I think those are spheros that they're working with. So lots of exciting technology, robotics and coding at Glenwood, all sorts of things. Another term that we hear a lot is the makerspace. We just wanted to clarify, a makerspace doesn't have to be in the library. Sometimes it's incorporated in the library learning commons, and sometimes another part of the school takes that on. But often the teacher librarians are involved with the makerspace, and it's just a chance for students to create using design thinking or design challenges. So here's a design challenge with Lego at Dorothy Peacock. And this is you, I think.
So in addition to all those exciting, colorful, noisy activities, busy activities that are taking place in our Library Learning Commons, we still have the base for information literacy is the key. So we have the important role of teaching our students how to evaluate and assess information, where to find the information, what to do with the information, what are your questions about that information, and what are you going to do with it when you've got it all sorted out. In the corner there's some of the great sites that we use with students to show bogus sites online and teaching them about fake news. And then we go on to share information as well. The school databases, the district databases that we purchase for online use for all of our students for K-12 are really key. And then many of our Library Learning Commons also take on the virtual Learning Commons piece. So these websites are growing and taking on a bigger role to support our students and staff and communities, and they become interactive as much as possible. And this is an example of a virtual learning commons that didn't exist before this year. This is one of our new teacher librarian that was able to take on the library at Stafford this year, and she's created this for their school. Now, not all of our new TLs have had the time. We're all coming in at different places in this career or this job this year. So some schools have their virtual learning commons up and running, but it is our goal as a Teacher Librarian Association in Langley. By the end of next year, we will work together and support each other, and we will have those in place for every school. They don't all know that yet, but you're the first. Oh, heritage fairs, dear to my heart. Heritage fairs, and thank you, Rosemary. You will see someone you know in these pictures. We had, let's see, 5 schools take on Heritage Fair this year, and this is a project that takes months to do. It can be students from grade 4 to 9. Most of ours are grade 4, 5, and 6 this year, and grade 7 that did it in the schools. So they choose an individual project and something that's of interest to them, and they create, they do their research, and they create a project, they create a board, they create a written report, they create a creative component, and then they compile with more artifacts. They create a display that invites people to come and hear their story. And then we are able to collaborate with community volunteers. So we have the Centennial Museum is key, and the Langley Heritage Society, and the Jeff Chennett at the Centennial Museum coordinates all of the judges for each one of the schools. So that's where Rosemary was one of our volunteers at a couple of the schools, and the kids get interviewed and they speak about their projects. So you have these grade 4 children for the very first time, as nervous as they could possibly be, sharing their knowledge, and by the end of it they are just puffed right up because they know that they know it and they have taught the adults. It is just everything that the new curriculum is in practice. So it's a pretty powerful activity, and we had a number of schools come out and see them, and more TLs will be working with their teachers to have that happen in more schools next year.
Of course, the place of a Library Learning Commons is to encourage literacy, traditional literacy, and reading for pleasure. So we are involved in all sorts of initiatives, from displays and blind dates with a book on the bottom corner there. That's from Fine Arts School. So lots of neat things going on there. And also partnerships with Fraser Valley Regional Library.
Yeah, we have 2 really important activities that we work with. The Fraser Valley Reading Link Challenge is for grade 4-5 students, and the schools decide if they want to have a team or teams to read a certain amount of books. They're donated by the Fraser Valley to the schools. The kids read the books and then they compete and at the school level, and then the Fraser Valley organizes a district competition, and one school will go on to compete against Lower Fraser Valley, other Fraser Valley schools. So that's been going on for a number of years, but this year we had more schools than ever because we have more schools with teacher librarians to support it. It's just a natural consequence. And this is our third year promoting the Public Library Card Initiative with our grade 2 students. And this too has started off simmering for the last couple of years, but this year was so exciting to have a key person in each school, the teacher librarian, to promote this. And we just liaise with the Fraser Valley and send the applications home with all of the students just to give them that opportunity and to make them aware of all the great things that are at the Fraser Valley Library as well, lifelong learners.
Drop Everything and Read is an initiative that we do every year, supported by the BCTLA. Just nice for kids not only to have the chance to drop what they're doing and read during school hours, but also to see the adults in their life, their teachers and their principals, drop everything and read and show the value of reading.
And of course, Langley Book of the Year. It's been in Langley since, I believe, the late 80s. And that's for our grade 4 to 8 students. And we select 10. Sometimes we just can't decide, and we have to have 12. And the students are able to read them by choice, for pleasure, from early fall until May. And in fact, in the next 2 days, we will have the winner from this 12 books announced soon. And Picture Book of the Year, only in its 4th year. So this gives our little guys in a primary a chance to evaluate and assess what they like in literature. So we choose 10 books, and we do this in January to March. And the librarians promote this and support this through. So again, every elementary school was able to participate this year, so that's a first. Just so that you're probably wanting to know that it was the rock, paper, scissors.
Yes.
The legend of the rock, paper, scissors did win. It was a landslide.
Got to run out and buy it.
And Family Literacy Day is in January, and we like to do contests and promote literature throughout the year. And this is just one fun example. In January, we had a little bingo sheet with all these great reading and writing, speaking, and math activities, literacy. And they take them home for a week, and they crossed them off, and they brought them back to school, and we did a draw, and these are the happy winners. And I just want to clarify up there in the top right-hand corner, that middle student is actually a teacher.
We've had some author visits this year at Learning Commons at Brookswood. Susan Nielsen came to Brookswood to talk, and Eric Wilson, who some of you might recognize from your school days, he was at Yorkson. So the kids get pretty excited when they can interview the authors. The last piece that we wanted to just share with you was how important it is that the teacher librarian and other staff teach ethical use of technology, digital citizenship, and also advocate for intellectual freedom. We celebrate Freedom to Read Week at most of our libraries, certainly our secondaries every year. And we do have something further to say about that in just a moment, but I think, Deb, you wanted to close before we move to the next slide.
Yeah, just to close, as you can see, all of the great things that were able to happen in our schools this year with the support of a teacher librarian in every school. And we look forward to the continued support that we will need to make these programs continue to support the staff and the students and the communities in Langley, because we all benefit from the things that are happening there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So, whoops. Finally, you know, it's really exciting to hear about how many of our teachers are involved in of our Learning Commons teachers, and we wanted to especially acknowledge, and I know the board I'm going to read off the slide because I keep trying to remember this, but I couldn't do it. Yeah. So, and it says he's been nominated, but actually he was appointed to be a member of the Intellectual Freedom Committee of the Canadian Federation of library associations. Try to say that 3 times fast. But not only was he not appointed there, but then he was actually chosen as the chair of the committee. So that really speaks to the respect that Richard has, you know, across Canada in terms of teacher librarians. So he's going to be representing school librarians across Canada regarding many of the intellectual freedom issues, access to information, fake news, because it's actually a thing. And I love that. And the right to be forgotten online. Yeah, I just want to, I'm so curious about that one. I want to find out more from Richard about that. But we wanted to acknowledge Richard for all of his contributions to our district, but also certainly across Canada. And he is, again, just very well respected, and we wanted to. And we'll all stand up here for any questions you have.
Trustee Todd.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know if it's a night of hope, but it just excites me when we talk about libraries in school, because you referenced the fact that librarians are kind of the heart. I would say the library is the heart of a school. And when you have a fully staffed librarian in the school, a school comes alive. It's the quintessential part of a school. And oftentimes we hear kind of the not the chaos, but you know, the difficulties around restoration of a collective agreement. And I think we're entering the renaissance of the library, because the restoration of librarians in our schools will bode well. And I look forward to seeing our literacy scores improve with this, because I just think we need some data around that, but that's my hope, that you hold up a book and you help a learner. So I did have one question around mentorship and just that, because I saw your graph that talked about this and the people willing to commit their next little while in specific training for this, but mentorship, you know, one of you is retiring, but maybe the mentorship program needs to be kind of a critical mass to help those librarians. And I think some of the people that are sitting there, they would be excellent mentors. So,
actually are involved in the district as a cohort of the district mentorship program. And then just as regular, we also meet as a group once a month, and the relationships and the friendships and the communications have just built over the year. So you're right, it's huge. We're on it.
Trustee McVeigh.
Thank you for the presentation and the incredible work that's going on within the library and the Learning Commons areas, and I can hear the enthusiasm in your voices and the excitement that you bring to the team of teacher librarians. Can I just ask if all the schools are now staffed with, or almost all of them, staffed with a full-time teacher librarian, does that mean there was a time in our district when libraries were closed for part of the day or various days of the week? Can I assume then that they're open all day now and that kids have access to the library for the chunk of the day while they're there?
Firstly, we have a teacher librarian with a partial contract to 100%, but not every school has a full-time TL. All of the elementary schools also have a library tech on staff. So for most of the elementary schools, that is true. The doors are open. And the secondaries are all good. They're all full-time. And middle schools, I think, are pretty good with technician and teacher librarian as well. So it's not absolute 100%, but it's closer than we've ever been. So it's.
Thank you. That's great to hear. I'm happy to hear that, because I think, to Trustee Todd's point, there's some really positive things that will come from that. And congratulations to you, Richard. You've been a really powerful advocate for the work of teacher librarians and the value of libraries. So I'm really proud for you to have this recognition and this opportunity to serve. So congratulations.
Trustee Coburn.
I just really want to say that I really love librarians because I was a disaster as a child, and the library was the best part of my school day because it was probably the only time I wasn't getting in trouble and being told to sit still, except for when I was outside in PE. So the library is really important for, you know, kids like me. And in the library where I was allowed to be free and explore is where I really got my love of books. And so my question to you as whatever librarian, I don't know what your name is now, but because the point is it's changed because of digital and online. So I'm wondering how you find the balance between the book, the hard cover, the traditional book, and everything that the book does, because it does something quite different to the brain than digital online, which is also very important because we have to prepare our children. We can't cling to this tradition. We have to prepare them. But how do you balance the love of the book and the need to love the book with the drawing to the digital, the online, and the need to prepare them? And how has that changed your role as librarians?
While you were speaking, the one thing I would say is I would say that there's been sort of a natural delineation that has happened, I think, without us planning it, and that is because nonfiction is so frequently changing. It seems that much of our nonfiction is becoming accessible primarily through digital databases and reliable websites. But I would say that I think most of our libraries still have the hard copy book, and kids quite happy to read the hard copy book for their fiction and their picture book. I work at LSS, and I never have kids asking me for ebooks. They enjoy the process of reading the hard copy book. Ebooks will probably be, at some point, we will probably move in that direction, but like I say, it sort of has naturally fallen that the nonfiction and the fiction has separated into the digital and the hard copy. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but that's my experience. Yeah.
They're still there.
Yeah. We're holding it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For the fiction.
It says the right to be forgotten, and I think it's very important for us. I just came back from a national review of librarians across Canada, and one of the things they're talking about, and this was sent out by the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, and basically he's working with different groups across Canada, but the one thing that we're trying to teach kids, in our particular case of teacher librarians, is to be wary of what's online. So one of the things we do, obviously, is we teach critical literacy in grade 9, and in grade 11 we teach transitional literacy, where we teach them about the experience of moving on to a higher level of education. Something that's going to come in between all of that is called algorithmic literacy. Now, it sounds like math or it sounds like coding, but it isn't. What it is, it's basically going to teach kids that once they're online, that there are things that happen, right? And algorithms basically take them to different roads. And literally what that means, that if you click on something, it could be clickbait, and it'll take you to something that could be fake news. If you click on a link, that will be put into your data set, and every time you go back on after that, it gives you information about that one time you clicked online for something that's there. So this is something that we're going to introduce to kids in the district at the high school level. It's basically that when you travel online, there are different roads to be taken, and algorithms basically become part of your choices of what you look at online. So every time you click on something, which means that two kids literally searching on Google and asking a word would have two different responses based on the data sets and the clicks that they've done and the searches they've done before. So this is something that we're going to work on. We're working on it at the national level, but we're also going to be working on here locally. And one of the advantages that I have, as they said, is I'm teaching a lot of the new teacher librarians coming up, and we'll be working with them also to create presentations and instructions for kids that are going on. And the right to be forgotten is that once they do that, they can move away from that, right? The ability to basically say, I want these things that are in my data set removed so that I can have a clear path to my research online.
Very interesting. Thank you. Trustee Wallace.
Sorry, we're keeping you guys because you were so awesome. We all love libraries. For me, I'd like to, well, congratulations, Richard, firstly. And I just wanted to say that I liked in your slide how you put library learning commons flexible physical space. I'm glad that you put there because I like the fact that libraries aren't intimidating and they're multi-use and they're for every kind of learner. I mean, as somebody who struggled with reading, you know, that the library was a space that I felt comfortable, but it seems like it's getting even better and better. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Trustees, can we get a motion that the Board of Education receives the report on framework for enhanced student learning commons for information as presented? Moved by Trustee Dykeman, seconded by Trustee Ross. Any other comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That brings us to the information items and
summer session.
Summer session. Mr.
So I'm going to call on Principal Ron Stair to step forward, please. And Ron wears a number of different hats beyond just being principal of Langley Education Center. Ron approached me, I think it was about 4 years ago now, around saying, hey, Gord, I think we can do a lot more around summer session in terms of opportunities and growth, and boy, has that taken off. And tribute to Ron with his vision around that. And I don't think he realized exactly where it was going to go ultimately in terms of popularity. But this is something that's not only seen tremendous growth, I think it's given students in that long summer chance to take on some things they wouldn't have traditionally had the opportunity to do. So Ron here tonight, opportunity to kind of update where we're at in the process. There's always something new that's put out there. Again, I really appreciate his efforts there. So turn over to you, Ron.
Thanks very much. I'm going to apologize from the get-go. I'm still recovering from an accident a couple of weeks ago, and on top of that, I managed to pick up a cold on the weekend. So it's not false humility to say I'm not really on top of my game. So my goal is not to say anything stupid tonight. So hopefully I can get through that. It's interesting, though, you look back, this is my 8th year of involvement with summer session, and it is exciting to see how we've grown from really just a secondary focus to the broad focus we have now. So, and it's been with the support of the DLT and the whole district, really, so it's exciting to see where it's gone and where it's going. So my goal is to give you a quick overview of that tonight. So our mission is to provide short-term educational opportunities for our students that will hopefully, without reading the whole thing, but basically will benefit them in the long term. And we talked about libraries. Our goal as well with the things like literacy, numeracy, the engagement with learning that happens in the summertime, that will really help our students in the long term. And that's not just a statement, we really take that to heart. We're excited that summer session aligns with the district's mission and vision, and also that we're connecting with the new redesigned curriculum, specifically with numeracy and literacy areas, the focus that are there, because that's sort of where we started, a focus on and helping students that needed some extra enrichment. But also the know, do, understand. For any of you that have had a chance to come to summer session programs, it's very hands-on with a lot of the activities. So they're very much about doing and not just book learning and things like that. And very similar to things that are happening throughout the year, but in a very compressed format. But also the personalized and flexible opportunities. So students have an opportunity to try something different that really appeals to them in the short term. And so that's, again, it aligns well with our redesigned curriculum. So I've already given you a quick review, but just for context for tonight, last year we had 13 different locations with a variety of opportunities, both in interests, the grade levels from grade 1 to grade 12, geographically diverse across our whole district. We had about 4,000 students last year. And that involves, obviously, to make this all happen, you need a lot of staff. So we had over 185 teachers, approximately 54 SEAs, 15 admin, plus all the other support staff, clerical people involved in the registration piece. So it's a big task to get it all going. And really, without all those people willing to work in the summer, it's not going to happen. So we want to acknowledge that, obviously. And just getting to this year, a quick overview. Registration opened on April the 9th, and both online and in person at the board office. Our elementary and middle registrations are about 9% higher than they were the same time last year. And then when I look back to the previous year, it's a bit cut off there, but we're about 18% higher. So we're about a 9% growth rate over the last couple of years. And one of the things, though, at some point, like we sort of reached capacity. We're getting close to that, I think, now with our current number of sites we have, the number of people that are involved, and the resources it takes to run the program. Doesn't mean we couldn't grow, but at some point, it's hard to say what our actual start numbers will be. They may not be 8 or 9% above where, because at some point we max out the schools. One thing we're finding that once registration opened on the 9th, there was a fairly big flood of people in certain areas in particular. So almost like those schools filled up really quickly because we only have so many classroom spaces available there. So it's good, but it's also you're trying to make sure you can manage all that and make as many spots available for as many people as possible. And our secondary registrations were really, and it's not a bad thing, it's just we've sort of plateaued over the last 3 years because we've sort of hit this sort of sweet spot of hitting the needs of the secondary clientele, if you want to call them that. And so our registration really hasn't dropped. It's been pretty steady all the way through, and that's the same pattern we're seeing this year so far. And a quick update of some of the changes, and one of the first ones, I'm actually calling it a mindset change. We've always called our sort of literacy and numeracy, or anywhere where students needed learning support, we've called it learning support, but we were actually trying to change the mindset around that from the get-go, and we're calling it skill builder. There's a bit of a negative connotation when you hear I'm in learning support versus I'm getting some skill building opportunities. So it's sort of the same focus, but we hope both the teachers and the students will have that idea of building skills, not it being a negative with the learning support sort of moniker with it. On top of that, some new courses we're doing this year, borrowing some ideas we've heard from other districts that have worked really well and things that are happening in our district. So we're going to offer a computational thinking and coding class at the middle school years. It filled up within about 3 weeks, so with 2 cohorts, so we know that that's already popular. Our Humanities 8 and 9, we're changing a little bit this year. So instead of offering a focus on English and social studies and having students go through the content to focus on that, we're really more interested in trying to find ways to help them build their skills so they can be successful next year. So it'll still be somewhat content-based, but we're actually trying to focus more on those skills so they can succeed when they move on to either English or social studies 9 and 10. And so we're hoping that'll make a difference for their success in the long term, and also in more of an engagement process and the skills, not just, oh, I got to go through all that again. The other thing we're offering a little bit different this year is an ELL language skill builder course for 8, 9, and 10. So the difference is in the past we've always had a paid course for ELL extra, but this is actually totally free. It's at the high school level. We obviously have a lot of students who need some extra support at the ELL in the early secondary years. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And again, that course filled up quite quickly. And we're also offering for the first time a French immersion at the upper level. Before we've always had the elementary middle program, so now we've got one running out of Brookswood this year, and we're trying to see if we can get enough enrollment to have that one run. Right now, at least one of them will probably run. And we're expanding down with our sports and fitness. We have a middle years sports and fitness program that's been very successful, but now we're going to be offering it at a little bit the lower levels at grade 4 and 5 as well. And finally, just one of the other highlights, it's just one, but our musical theater program has always done really well at Yorkson. So we actually have been able to hire 2 teachers with 2 cohorts of students this year. So it's a growing program as well. So those are just some of the highlights, but across the board, things are going really well as far as the registration goes. I wanted to highlight once again our youth at risk programs, and we talk about these every year, and it's just interesting to see how they've grown over the last number of years. Any of the trustees who have heard me talk about youth at risk in the past probably remember these are opportunities really outside of the main summer programs for individual schools and sites to provide programs that will actually benefit the students who are at risk at those sites. And fortunately, with the agreement we have with the LTA, we have a letter of understanding to allow hiring of teachers that will actually be working with those students so that we actually build those relationships long term. So that's a great opportunity for those staff and students to make some connections. And it's an opportunity that's more of a homegrown solution within that building to try and see what the needs are. So I help support it. I help the principals and the teachers to get it going, but they basically run it within the program itself. But we fund it through summer money, so it works out really well for everybody. Betty Gilbert's going to be running a program again this year. Last year they took a bit of a break. This year they're running again, and that's for existing students to maintain connections in their building. The DW Poppy cohort, they've actually taken off. They have about, last year I think they had about 70 students in the first 2 weeks of July. And they're actually helping all the feeder school students coming into their school get ready to start in September. So again, a different focus and different time frame, but they're finding it makes great connections. And those students basically get identified by the school, say, hey, this student really needs that extra support before they get started. The HC Stafford program has changed a little bit. Last year, they started a program again for incoming students. They also used to have a program where Mindy Jansen was involved there. They had 2 different programs. So this year, Vanguard, which you'll see in just a second, is offering that program where Mindy is now. But Stafford is still maintaining their August program for incoming students from grade 5, all their feeder schools coming into their program. Vanguard, I just mentioned, that's for existing students to maintain connections with them over the summer. And then finally, the Walnut Grove Gator Shades program, they're growing as well. They're actually going, before they had sort of a longer model for about 24 students. They've had so much interest from the feeder schools that have been identified, they're actually going into 2 cohorts and splitting it. And this will be 2 two-week programs, and they'll have more students engaged. I had a great opportunity to talk about you know, the needs of the location. I was talking with the Gator Shades staff a little bit the other day when we were planning. And they said, you know, it's interesting when you have students who are dealing with anxiety issues or they've been identified that could use that support at the beginning, even having a student come in for 2 weeks and having an opportunity, because there's, we sort of joke about it as adults, but I don't know how to open my locker, where is everything? It's very true. They talk about the fact that if you're dealing with anxiety, and one of the first things you have to deal is, I don't know where my classes are, I don't know how to open the locker, I'm afraid I'm going to get stuffed into a locker by an older student, all these urban myths. If they can actually sort of get rid of those from the get-go, the anxiety drops when they first walk in the door. And they also, if they're a student dealing with anxiety or other issues, or they have trouble fitting in, they actually know somebody in the building. They've already made positive connections with adults, so they know who to go to when things go sideways. So they're finding it makes a great difference for those students. So that's just one example, but that's why these youth at risk programs are really valuable. Excuse me. Again, we're offering recreation opportunities in partnership with the Township of Langley. They've expanded a little bit, so they're actually offering a number of sites this year, one more than last year, and they align with all of our other programs, so it's a nice partnership with them. So if there's any parents in the community that want their students to go to our summer program for free in the daytime, they can once again pay for the township to have the opportunities there. And then also the same thing with the City of Langley at Blacklock, and again, they align with our programs at Blacklock. So just to wrap things up here, our elementary and middle programs go from July 9th to 27th, so they run for 3 weeks. The difference is this year is we don't have Blacklock running at a different time frame, because with the Douglas Park altered calendar, we used to adjust it by 1 week so students from Douglas Park could be part of that. Now, because Douglas Park is in alignment with the rest of the district, we're having all of our programs running those same 3 weeks for the elementary and middle years. Also, we're back at RC Garnet this year, not at Richard Bullpit. We had gone to Bullpit because Garnet was under construction for a while. So we're able to sort of spread out a little bit more geographically back to Garnet this year. Secondary programs are a little bit shorter this year. We've been able to get them into 5 weeks. They start right away, though, on that July 3rd, right after the long weekend, and run right till August the 3rd, which is a bit of a benefit, though, because instead of it spreading over to 6 weeks like it has in the past, the staff and the students are done by August the 3rd, and especially the admin staff and the teachers, they don't get much of a break if they're teaching summer, so they're actually going to be able to get off a little bit and get a bit more of a break while still getting in the full course load that the students require. And then obviously the youth at risk run at various times depending on the programs. So startup is just over 1 month away, which is a bit scary, but we're well prepared. And we do invite you to come for a visit. I know a number of trustees and DLT members have come for visits this summer. And we invite you to come once we have the opportunity to have programs running. So I'm glad to stick around and answer any questions.
Trustee Wallace.
Thank you for your work. I'm just interested in your Blacklock program. Would that be fine art program?
So Blacklock and Langley Fine Arts have a mix of fine arts, but they also have the same, like the Jumpstart program, the literacy, the numeracy, but they have a bit more of a focus on the fine arts because they have the facilities available there. Mm. Yeah.
So I guess the question after this would be, so it's which school is doing the musical theater?
Yorks and Creek is the middle school that's offering musical theater. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to see where the kids, the students from Blacklock, if they were interested in, like, where do we go from Blacklock to middle school years? And is that a piece that people are interested in the city?
Well, it's we only have the ability to really function at so many sites. I mean, it is something we've talked about with the middle years, and especially as the district moves more to a middle years model, we'll have to see if we can open up more middle years programs. Right now, I said we're sort of running at capacity, and we could look at that. If people are from the city and do specifically want some programs, then they would have to go up to where the programs are offered right now.
Because there used to be a really successful musical theater summer program that did run out of Stafford.
Right.
So I'm just just going from, the travel, right? Being able to walk to your, your school and that interest, the kids that are interested in the fine arts and musical theater. I know that you guys are over capacity and I totally get it, but I'm just maybe just wanted to put that planted in your brain, maybe.
Yeah, and part of it has to do, I mean, all the time we're trying to make decisions about trying to offer the programs where we'll have enough student enrollment. I mean, our goal obviously for summer programs is not to be a drain on the finances of the district, so it's always based on having enough students to operate. So it would be just knowing, so every year we sort of tweak things a bit depending on, we think, well, let's try this program this year and we think it'll run. So yeah, we're always looking for new opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee Dykeman.
Wonderful. It's great to see the change year over year. I mean, I remember getting a tour from you the first year that it was running, and to look at the numbers now is just amazing. And the breadth and depth of the courses and the excitement that comes with it. My daughter came home from school the day the summer session flyers came out. She's like, no, you can't miss this date. You have to register me. I don't want to miss this.
Yeah.
And so it's apparently quite the conversation amongst the schools. There's excitement about getting to take part in these courses you regularly wouldn't, or getting to reach ahead a bit in something. So fantastic job on growing this program. It's taken on a life of its own.
Yeah, it has. And I mean, a lot of it has to do, when you talk to the administrators, you talk to teachers who work in the programs or SEAs, they actually talk about just the different life that happens at summer because of the collaborations you have with other people you don't normally work with, the ability to focus on one particular subject area or area of passion for 3 weeks, if it's the elementary middle years. Like a lot of, and you find many of the teachers come back because they enjoy it. I mean, yes, it's a bit of extra money, but I don't think a lot of them are doing it so much for the extra money as the fact that they have this opportunity for enrichment between colleagues, but also with students. So.
Trustee Todd?
Thank you, and thank you for the change in language. I know I've talked about that before too, from learning support, because I did register my daughter 2 years ago in learning support, but it just, again, and I'm a learning support teacher, but I like the term skill builder, and it's all about that mission, inspire all learners to reach their full potential. So thank you for that change.
Thank you, Ron. Oh, one more, Trustee Coburn.
Yeah, speaking about language, so youth at risk, not a term I'm crazy about. I would imagine that the risk is different for different youths situated differently across the school district. So could you tell me, if you know, some of the differences between, say, the kids at the Walnut Grove program versus the Stafford or Vanguard or wherever those programs are, what that risk looks like for those students?
Yeah, so the youth at risk is really a title we use sort of behind the scenes to just when we're doing our letter of understanding with the union and things like that. So none of the programs are specifically called youth at risk to the students. Like Gator Shades has their own program, so none of them refer to that as a youth at risk program. I mean, the risk really is students that we're concerned about losing the engagement piece, and it varies from school to school. Like I said, some students or some programs, like the ones. Let's go back to that slide for a second. Well, maybe I can't go back quick. It won't be too long. So some of the programs are interested in the transition of students who are identified needing that extra support rate from the get-go. So that's the risk. They're trying to engage them well from the beginning. Versus some of the programs, they've already identified students who are in their program that they're thinking, you know, if I don't see this student for the next 2 months, we've made such great gains with them. If we don't keep engaged with them, we're going to be going back 4 months when we see them in September. So that's the thing about it. And at the bottom of that slide that says specific to the student needs at each location, what's really, again, you know, it sounds great. I appreciate the feedback, but a lot of the ideas I've had is from talking to colleagues in other districts, and we get together, we brainstorm what's working at your district. And when I heard about a program that other schools were offering or other districts were offering, And it was basically like this, like, here's an opportunity, you give it to the schools and they look at what the needs are. So the risk piece is really depending on what the school identifies as areas where they find maybe there's hot spots that flare up, or the first month is difficult because they haven't engaged with students. So it really depends on the needs of the school. And what we're able to do through summer funding is provide an opportunity for them to pursue that if they would wish to. Yeah. Thank you.
And that brings us to the Willoughby Slope Elementary enrollment update. Mr. Stewart.
So the Willoughby Slope, in terms of growth, continues, and trying to manage that. We certainly are awaiting a new elementary school to assist in terms of the issues there around growth. But in the meantime, I commend Assistant Superintendent Mel Guilford's work with the community as we strategize until that day happens. How are we going to navigate through this? Some of that will involve changing school boundaries, and also in terms of determining capacity availability at each of our sites. So I've asked Mel to come forward tonight to give an update to the public in terms of where we're at with this process. So over to you, Mel.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. This evening I'm going to this evening I'm going to try and provide you some context regarding the enrollment growth on the slope. As well, I'm going to look at the current and future implications, and lastly I'll look at some of the plans that staff has in supporting the growth on the slope for each of our 5 elementary schools. Looking at Langley in general, I think the historical context is that we like to think of Langley as the farming community, but things have certainly changed over the last little while with the growth that we've been facing over the last few years. I was looking at some stats on the township website, and in January there was 83 new homes that were created, opened, or whatever, and of the 83, and that was just in the township, 43 of those were opened in the Willoughby area. So it gives you some context of how quickly, just in 1 month, we had the amount of growth. Over 50% of the growth was in one particular area. Certainly that growth certainly comes up with some opportunities for the township and for the city and for the district. For the township, obviously the development provides opportunities, increased population and economic viability. And for the school, in our district, we get new schools, certainly hiring of new staff, and new opportunities for students. All of those things are certainly benefits, but there are some difficulties or challenges that the district faces around the growth in the slope area. One of those things, as far as looking at the projections currently for 2018-2019, just a notice around the numbers that we have in place. And if we were to get no more students between now and September, we could probably make things work as far as our current space. One of the things that we just have to note from May of last year to May of this year, Willoughby Elementary's total enrollment changed by 100 students. So we have to anticipate the growth between now and September will be significant again this year, especially if you've driven through the area. So again, this is complicated, graph, or sorry, not graph, but a data table. But one of the things I want you to notice, just on the bottom row there, between 2018 and 2026, we're looking at an addition of 1,200 students in the slope area from K to 5. So the issues around our population and the growth of students is going to be significant for the Willoughby slope for years to come. I think another piece that is really, really important is to know that we've already reached our official capacity numbers. We did that this year, according to our projections. And again, just a side note that R.C. Garnet's have not included the new wing yet. So, we're somewhere around 2017, 2018, we'd have reached our official capacity. In addition, by 2019, all of our schools, 3 of the 5 of our schools will have reached their capacity, including Lynn Fripps, Richard Bulpett, and Willoughby. And so looking at plans on what we're going to be doing with those schools moving forward. Obviously, because of those numbers, our capital plan, our top priority, as Superintendent Stewart's already indicated, will be to have an additional elementary school in the Willoughby Slope area. but it won't end there. Obviously, looking at the numbers moving forward, probably the addition of at least 3 elementary schools, an additional middle school, and additional high school is probably what we're looking at over the next 5 to 10 years. So lots of work to be done. Lots of conversations around boundaries, lots of conversations around enrollment as well. So this is our actual spaces available as of April 12, 2018. The reason that's the date that we've utilized is that's when we first took in our information from our schools as far as enrollment was concerned, because we have the March 31st date. And Sam Morocco, who's always really great with data, was able to give me the space that was available. So that's 109 spaces in total. You'll notice as well that we already got a lot of 0 spaces out there around spaces in some schools. And that's just based really upon the grids that we had provided for April, because we want to ensure that we just provided enough grid space for the classes, for the students that were enrolled at that particular time. Sorry, I just want to go back really quickly. In addition to that, just since that time, and we keep a OneDrive document, we're up to 37 students just since that April date. I just checked just before I came down, so you know that the numbers are climbing quickly as time goes on. So just some consideration. Just over the last, with the reinstatement of the language from 2001, there was a decrease, or there was not a loss, but certainly a reuse of space. 10 of the classrooms were used for the class size composition. We will continue to utilize the campus model on the slope for sure. And some key things that we're going to have to deal with are the fact that Willoughby Elementary and Richard Bulpett Elementary are going to run out of space this year, and so they're going to need to be capped. And we'll have to have some natural overflows for the Willoughby region. We'll be looking at R.C. Garnet and Langley Meadows, and for for Richard Bulpett, Lynn Fripps will be the overflow school for the enrollment. So again, most of the students who enrolled before, or all the students that enrolled up to March 31st, will be accommodated in their current catchment schools. Some considerations, just some around space. Langley Meadows still has 2 portables available. Lynn Fripps is getting 2 portables. R.C. Garnet has 3 available still. They had 4 left over that were in use during the construction phase. Richard Bulpett at capacity, as I mentioned. Willoughby has the potential for 1 more portable. However, again, it would require washroom facilities for that to happen. And if you talk to the Willoughby community, I think they would say that they would certainly feel like their school is pretty much at capacity right now. One of the notes that I should provide for you is that with the 2 portables that we provided for Willoughby right now, we've been working with the Early Learning Hub at Willoughby, and one of the 2 portables will be utilized by the Early Learning Hub, and that way we don't have to put, it saves 1 class from going outside, because we'll take 1 class back from Willoughby. And again, just was trying to count up over the last couple of years how many portables we have on the slope. Right now we're up to 18 if you start to count all of those portables, and in addition to that we have the 8 classroom spaces at R.C. Garnet. So again, making a significant investment on the slope in order to support the students that are there. Just a side note around transportation. Again, if we're starting to look at moving students from one catchment to another, there may be a consideration where we need to look at transportation for those students, and so that was just a little side piece for us. For our next steps, we've just sent out an email to our principals so that we can collect our most updated numbers. We'll create updated grids and add divisions as necessary. And we will certainly, the piece that we're going to go to next is have a cross-boundary meeting. So if there are students at Willoughby Elementary or at Richard Bulpett who wish to cross-boundary to either Lynn Fripps or another school in the slope where there's room, for Richard Bulpett or for Willoughby to R.C. Garnet, that we would certainly look at that depending on the space that's available at both buildings, and so that some of the walk-up students that come up moving forward, there'll be space in the grid for them as well. As we always do, we'll be back in September having the same conversations, looking at updating the waiting list, because inevitably we'll have more students through the summer, and then look at creating new classes over the summer if required, or at the beginning of September. for the students that walk in. And that's my report. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Mel. Trustee Dykeman.
Could we possibly go back? Sorry, could we possibly go back to the chart?
Which one? The big one?
The one before that. There you go.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
one forward.
Yeah.
There you go. The three on the top with the double asterisks, can you just confirm what that is? I just didn't see anything below.
No, sorry, that was from my report. But that Langley Meadows, that was just the 2 portables that were already there. So we weren't adding any there. So I just wanted that to be clear. I think with Len Pripps we were adding 2, but those didn't take into account any additional portables. And RC Garnet, I'm not sure what the answer. I think again it was just about the fact that the portables were already there.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Ross.
Thank you. I'm not sure I understood the campus model. Could you explain that to me? Forgive me if I...
Certainly, when students walk into our district after the March 31st deadline or after school starts in September, oftentimes there isn't enough room for the students within the grade that they're looking for, or if there's a family, sometimes we can accommodate one of the students, but not the sibling. So our principals are fantastic about making phone calls to the nearest schools and finding space for those families. They don't just leave them to go kind of work on their own. And so again, it's kind of an open process, and we try and find the space at the closest school. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So trustees, can we get a motion that the Board of Education receives the superintendent's information item reports as presented? Moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded Trustee Wallace. Other comments or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that brings us to the Policy Committee report and the administrative procedure on school security and key control. Trustee Dykeman?
So there's a recommendation coming out of our last Policy Committee, and it's that the Board of Education serves notice of motion to the district's education community and its education partner groups that it intends to adopt the revisions to Administrative Procedure 3540 School Security Key Control at the September 25th, 2018 regular board meeting. And this, I guess I'll move that first and then speak to it if there's a seconder.
Seconded by Trustee Ross. Continue, Trustee Dykeman.
So this is intended just to bring in some revisions to tighten up issues related to controls of keys in the district with some long-term views later on, perhaps to switching to a fob system. But I'm not sure if the Secretary Treasurer might like to add to that a bit.
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Isley? No. No?
All right, we're good. It's all in the background, though. So.
Okay, so we have that moved and seconded.
So.
Any other comments from trustees? All those in favor of the notice of motion? Any opposed? Okay, and we don't have any old business or new business, so that brings us to trustee comments. Let's start with Trustee Todd. Trustee McVeigh?
Nothing, thank you.
Trustee Dykeman?
A very brief one. Unfortunately, she's left, but Suzanne Perot, President of DPAC, this was actually her last meeting. She didn't rerun, and I just wanted to say, sort of on the record, that I'd like to thank her for all that she's done for DPAC, and she's done a lot to increase parent engagement in that area and worked really hard to tighten up policies and improve governance in the organization. And I wish and welcome the new executive, but certainly will miss Suzanne's presence at the table.
Thank you. Trustee Coburn.
Yeah, I'd also like to recognize Suzanne, even though she's not here. I started my PAC mom career as the DPAC rep, and I came to DPAC, and Suzanne was very welcoming. She right on me right away, and then she was instrumental in me making other decisions. So she's a wonderful person. She's all about inclusivity, even at the parental level, and our district owes her a tremendous amount of gratitude. So thanks, Suzanne. Have a good night.
Trustee Ross.
I just want to celebrate along with the foundation. We had a fabulous gala this weekend, fully sold out at the Equestrian Center, Thunderbird Equestrian Center. I believe we raised over $60,000. Had a wonderful time. The weather, of course, once again is in our favor. And just what a great district this is. I mean, it was just, you know, years ago I used to go to events and it'd be full of school district people. Now you go to events and the community is engaged and involved, and it's just wonderful. So again, I just applaud the work of the foundation. Thank you.
Trustee Wallace, any comments now that your thunder's been stolen?
Oh, he's kind of stole my thunder, but that's okay. I just would like to thank Megan and Shelley for their words about Suzanne, because has done a tremendous amount in this district and with parents and students, and she's always available to parents and students. So I wish she was here. I know that she knows we appreciate her. But I'm just going to also say, I just want to say to the committee, the Foundation Grand Prix Gala Committee, I just want to congratulate them on a successful event, and I'm very, very thankful for them. It was a lot of work leading up to that event, and a lot of great hands and great minds that put that together. I would like to thank Gord Stewart also for being there that day to help out with some of our other volunteers, and for everybody that came out. It was a wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, at the BC School Trustees Association event, they recognized trustees' terms of service, and Trustee McVeigh, you weren't able to be at that event, so they sent me yours. And so you got a certificate and a pin acknowledging 6 terms as a trustee. Congratulations. So that brings us to question period. Do we have any questions of items on tonight's agenda? Going once, going twice. You have a motion to adjourn. Trustee Coburn, seconded Trustee Wallace. Ross, I meant to say. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much.